The headline, Jordan causing tangle in testy tune-up.
Wow. Oh, goodness.
Michael Jordan was in the middle of 2 confrontations during practice, including a shouting match with Orlando and a tussle with Dave Corzine.
Hang on, I don't know how to feel about this.
Dave wins. It's all good, man. Relax.
I love Dave.
Dave wins.
What's MJ doing?
Dave wins. Relax.
Oh, sweet.
I always like to say that Michael got to play with me for a year at North Carolina. I think it really helped him.
Spectacular player from the beginning.
You can see right away Jordan was going to be a big-time scorer.
And showed what an impact he was going to have on the league.
This is NB86, celebrating the 30-year anniversary of Michael Jordan and the Chicago Bulls' 1986 NBA season. And now your hosts, Adam Ryan and Aaron Steen.
Welcome back to another episode of NB86. Getting down to the business end of the season here, mate. We're going to close out the regular season with this episode. Welcome to you again, Aaron. How are you today, mate?
Adam, do you love NBA? Do you love NBA history? Do you love the Chicago Bulls? And do you love Michael Jordan?
Let me think about that. Yes, 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 and yes.
Well, one word. Believe I can call it a word. NB85. Check it out.
Good effort, mate. Thank you.
I give and I give and I give.
You do, mate. You're always a giver. If you're a regular listener, welcome back. If you're new to the show, thanks for joining us. Feel free to head back to episode 1 of NB86 and actually episode 1 of NB85 and catch up with the 42 episodes that precede this one. Before we get going, we had a great review that we received. iTunes username of KCM81. We're fairly confident this is at KMartin81 on Twitter. Thanks very much, mate, for a fantastic review. The review is titled Great Show. He types, great show as always. I especially enjoy when you guys go over the season reviews and I hear stories that were written back then. Thanks for making my commute to work a little more enjoyable. So I can't thank you enough for that great review. Every single review we get, mate, helps the show's rating in iTunes as well. Just awesome to get this sort of feedback.
Love these reviews from our listeners. I sincerely question their judgment, obviously, to want to listen. But no, I really appreciate the other feedback. It's awesome.
It is great.
NBA News, Notes and Quotes. March 24th through April 13th, 1986.
The 3-game win streak prior to his return and 5-game losing streak since his return had Jordan fearing his presence might be hurting the Bulls. MJ said he felt he was disrupting the balance of the team as he was trying to fit 40 minutes of productivity into 14 minutes of game time. His 35% shooting clip pointed towards his rushed shot selection, and the man himself said he needs to either play full games or be banned from playing at all.
I came across this in my research for this episode as well in a couple of different papers where he all but said, play me more minutes or I'll sit out. I'll briefly reference that a bit later on.
And he also added that if he was going to re-injure the foot, that he would have done it by now. Thank you, Dr. Jordan. With 10 games remaining in the regular season, the Bulls had to chase down a 2.5-game lead held by the Cleveland Cavaliers, who had a noticeably harder schedule down the stretch than that of the Chicago Bulls. Visiting Boston in perhaps a preview of things to come, Houston dropped a 114-107 decision to the 58-13 Celtics. Bird was awesome as he notched up 36 points in 39 minutes and went a perfect 10 for 10 from the line. The story of the game for Houston was Ralph Sampson's nasty second quarter fall. Now, initially it was feared that he may have broken his back, so clearly it was a very dicey play that led to him falling over. I don't think I've seen this before, actually.
I tried to find it online, but I couldn't. I'll tweet out a photo or two. You can see the grimace on his face. He landed on his back and neck whilst he was going for a rebound, and he was taken to the Massachusetts General Hospital for x-rays and a CAT scan of his head, legs and neck. So they were doing all the precautionary stuff they could. You could argue that Ralph's career was never the same after the fall. Houston coach Bill Fitch stole the show with the quote of the day, if Ralph needs a little R&R in the Bahamas, I'll take him there myself. So that was nice work there from Captain Video, his nickname was, Bill Fitch.
And very considerate of him too, as head coach of the team.
No doubt. So just further to that, whilst playing through to the 1992 NBA season, Sampson didn't accumulate more than one full season's worth of games in the last 3 years he was in the league. So sadly, it was a case of what could have been. Perhaps he was such a dominant college player and was so good early on into his pro career. But this was certainly one of the things which stopped his advancing from too much more of a prominent place in the NBA. Washington won, but it was still Charles in charge. Barkley dialed up 36 points and 24 rebounds, but was not enough as his Philadelphia 76ers fell 100-93 at Washington. The Bullets' scoring was better balanced with Jeff Malone, Cliff Robinson and Gus Williams, all scoring 21 or more apiece. From the Wilmington Morning Star, according to a Suns spokesman, Phoenix's Rod Foster spent almost 5 hours waiting for assistance in a remote desert area after suffering a career-threatening fracture in an off-road accident. It required a 3-hour operation on his left leg, and the Suns released Foster in June of this year, 1986, not 2016, and he did not play again in the NBA, which was, quite an interesting little bit of information there that I had no idea about.
Yeah, same. Add Rod Foster to the list of NBA players I've never heard of before. How many seasons had he played, do you know, up to that point?
I think he only played 3 seasons.
Okay.
And he was teammates with, dare I say, former podcast guest Michael Holton, episode 72 of the show. So they were teammates at UCLA. In the Pro Basketball Notes section of the Morning Star, Michael Adams of the Bay State Bombardiers was named the CBA's Rookie of the Year. In second place was Adrian Branch, who was a future member of the LA Lakers before travelling to our fine shores of Australia, where he became a household name in our National League, the NBL, back in the 1990s. Third place, none other than Nigel Miguel, former guest and great friend of the show, episode 68. Hello to Nigel if you're listening, which I hope he is. One more thing for this date, mate. On the same day's edition, the article, and I referenced this a little bit earlier, Jordan wants full-time status or not play was the headline. MJ made the ultimatum to the Bulls, up his minutes per game or he'll just sit out the season. So Tim Hallam, I think the Bulls PR man, was quick to shoot down that assertion.
Even though they agreed on a minutes restriction, MJ went from 0 to 100 in his getting a little pushy about increasing his playing time.
We mentioned in the previous episode his competitive nature was off the charts. Now, on the 25th of March, New York travelled to Chicago in front of 10,561, and the Bulls had a 111-98 victory and moved to 25-48 on the season. For Chicago, Orlando Woolridge had 22 points, Maximum Security Banks had 20 and 11 boards. MJ had 19 points, 3 boards and 3 assists in just 19 minutes played, and the Oak Tree, Charles Oakley, had 12 boards. For New York, Ken the Staircase Bannister had 22 points and 7 boards, and Darryl the Pedestrian Walker, 16 points, as the Knicks dropped to 22-51.
It was a night of firsts from a team that seemed to be headed for last, wrote Bob Sakamoto. The first win for MJ since his return, Orlando's first start since February 19, and the first time that Michael Jordan let the game come to him. The 111-98 win brought Chicago to within 1.5 games of Cleveland for the last spot in the playoffs after taking control of the game in the third term. The Bulls committed 14 first-half turnovers due to some tight, trapping Knickerbocker defense, but still held a 3-point halftime lead. The trio of Banks, Woolridge and Oakley out-rebounded the entire Knicks team 30-28.
Yeah, that's a great effort there.
The flowing river banks of turnovers was stemmed in the second half as Stanley turned the ball over to John Macbeth Paxson, who spent 26 minutes on court slashing through the aforementioned Knicks press. Knicks coach Hubie Brown stayed in New York with the flu. His assistant Bob Hill,
former podcast guest, episode 14.
It's almost like I paused deliberately.
Yeah, who would have thunk? Great friend of the show too, Bob Hill. G'day to Bob if you're listening.
His assistant Bob Hill replaced him for this game, and it was being reported that Kansas coach Larry Brown was favoured to replace him at season's end.
Interesting times. Dominique scored 34 of his 36 points through the game's first 3 quarters as his visiting Hawks defeated the Cavs 97-91 at Richfield Coliseum. He missed the previous game at Milwaukee due to a bout of food poisoning, and I subsequently read in a follow-up tidbit from the Milwaukee Journal that Wilkins ate some dodgy oysters in Dallas the day before. March 26. Milwaukee at Boston was an old-fashioned barn burner. The Celtics prevailed 121-115 in a game that featured 16 ties. Now, I'm not sure why Some of the players were dressed up in their formal wear, but we'll move on.
I knew you were going to say that.
Did you really? Wow. I worked it in there so I could say that.
Yeah.
I'm getting too predictable.
Groundbreaking.
Boston moved to 59-13, and Milwaukee were 50-23 with the loss. Bird broke the Bucks with a 35-point, 12-rebound and 6-assist effort. DJ scored 29, and Parrish, McHale, Ainge and Walton all had 10-plus points. For Milwaukee, Terry Cummings, episode 17, had 31 points and 15 rebounds. Sid the Squid, Moncrief, that is, had 25 points. Craig Hodges, Paul Pressey and Randy Brewer had 15, 12 and 12 points respectively.
I like the wonderful arrogance / laziness that you've cut back the shameless self-promotion to episode 17 rather than the entire web address.
That's right. I've got to stop it at some stage. There might be a full episode one day where we record and there's no mention of any shameless self-promotion. At home, Philadelphia's Moses Malone dragged down career rebound 11,000 in his 76ers 112-103 win versus Atlanta. Barkley added 23 points and 19 rebounds for the Sixers. Utah's Adrian Dantley scored 37 points in a 116-101 win over the visiting Denver Nuggets. And in the absence of Sampson, Akeem was a dream for Houston, but a nightmare for the Pacers in the Rockets' 110-101 victory at Indiana. He had 27 points and 21 boards. Robert Reed had 21 points, and Lewis Lloyd had 20 points and 10 rebounds for the 45-28 Rockets. Herb Williams, a name you've heard quite a bit in recent episodes, had another great game for the Pacers. He had 20 points and 16 boards. Finally, rookie Ed Pinckney scored a would-be career-high 27 points as his Phoenix Suns defeated the visiting Supersonics of Seattle 120-107. Random story, in 1994 when I was on my NBA tour, saw the Golden State Warriors play at Boston Garden. I was standing about 2 meters away from Ed Pinckney, stared at him for about 35 seconds, was too nervous to say hello and walked away. Great story, hey? Episode 37 of the show is our 1994 season recap, which was a blinder, I should add.
March 27, 'tis the season for the Bulls to ask why.
Why?
Why do you ask? There were some hard questions to be asked on the horizon at one magnificent mile, wrote Bob Sakamoto. The organization thought this team was better than its 25-48 record, despite long-term absences of MJ, Daly, Oldham, Corzine and Woolridge. Jerry Krause stated that every addition they had made to the team in Paxson, Macy, Gervin, Banks, Holton and Brown had been of benefit to the team, but was non-committal on the situation of head coach Stan Albeck, as was Jerry Reinsdorf. Krause's current contract was to get him through the end of the 87-88 season, and Jerry Reinsdorf said that even though the jury is out after the season the team had delivered, he was happy with the work of Krause.
Well, when you hear those names in retrospect there, mate, the Bulls were absolutely ravaged by injury the entire season. Goes without saying, of course. Jordan missing for 64 games doesn't help, but they had a lot of other injuries and off-court issues, including Daly and Woolridge as well, not even just injury side of things.
That's correct. Rod Higgins was expected to be cut on this day to make way for the return of Dave Corzine, with Michael Holton also a possibility to be cut, despite him being signed on for the remainder of the year. Looking at the 86-87 season, Krause said the Bulls would be solid in the front court with Oakley, Green, Banks and Woolridge, with Chicago having recently made a counter offer to Woolridge in contract negotiations.
Just 3 games were on the NBA slate on this day. The pick of the lot was Mike Mitchell's 44 points at Golden State Warriors. Not enough, though, as his San Antonio Spurs fell 121-118. Now, Mitchell's career high was 47 versus the Pistons back in February of 84. He had some pretty high-scoring games throughout this season, a couple of 40-pluses and numerous 30-plus. At New York, Dallas's Mark Aguirre scored 21 points in less than 10 first-quarter minutes as the Mavericks secured a playoff berth. Their 11-4 mark acquired the team's most wins in a month in franchise history. Talking about the injury and illness curse that has enveloped the Knicks season, Coach Dick Motter said post-game, "I want to get out of this building before the epidemic spreads to us." The lone bright spot for the Knicks, who also lost Rory Sparrow to a broken ankle in this game, was Ken Bannister's 35-point and 13-rebound effort. So good to see Bannister stepping up. A career high for points. His next highest score would be 26 points 8 days later at Boston.
So you might like to say that he took a step down in the scoring column. On the 28th, Dave Corzine was buoyed with an article from Bob Sakamoto all to himself. On his early return to play from a broken hand, the Sacks headline wrote, Corzine can lend his hand.
I tell you, it's no wonder that I continually pepper these recordings with wordplay and puns. We're learning from the best mate, the Sack, and numerous other reporters as well.
We're a product of our environment, Adam.
We are indeed.
Expected to be out for 6 weeks with the injury, Dave rejoined the team a week early in East Rutherford to play the Nets. Corzine said that there was pain in the hand when he hit it, but he wants to play as bad as anybody to help the Bulls make the playoffs. The 14 games that he missed were the first in his 8-year career, as he played in 481 consecutive games up to that point. The Sack added in his durability that Corzine isn't the kind of guy who eats quiche. I actually enjoyed a lovely quiche and salad myself for dinner last night, so I'm not sure what Bob was talking about there.
Yeah, that's a strange one. I'm not sure what's read into that, but Corzine's longevity and health were a great factor that led to him being the Chicago Bulls' leading games played player throughout the 1980s, which is a great stat to have to his name as well.
Great stat and hashtag quiche lovers unite. Corzine joked that he won't have to worry about the hand affecting his ability to block shots because he doesn't block any.
Did he say that?
Yeah, he said that. It's not affected at all by shooting and passing, only when some force is applied to it when pushing off someone. Lucky MJ didn't have a broken hand in Game 6 of the 1998 NBA Finals.
Hello to Brian Russell, if you're listening. Wow, that's a good one.
Corzine's size would be much appreciated after 6'9" rookie Charles Oakley had played all-star basketball in the pivot for the Bulls of late.
Yeah. On the 28th, Chicago at New Jersey in front of 14,846 saw the Nets defeat the Bulls 118-107. Chicago dropped to 25-49. For the Bulls, Woolridge had 32 points, Oak 14 rebounds, and MJ had 22 points, 3 assists and 5 steals in 22 minutes of game time. For the Nets, Mike Jaminski, that's a name you'll hear a bit later in this episode, had 26 points and 12 boards, Otis Birdsong 23 points and 7 boards, and Buck Williams 16 points and 11 boards. This was a major dent in the Bulls' hopes to make the postseason. However, as you alluded to a bit earlier, Cleveland's schedule to finish off the regular season was quite brutal, and that was the only thing that really kept Chicago in the chase to those final few games.
The Bulls lost this game to New Jersey exactly 7 minutes and 4 seconds before the game ended, wrote Bob Sakamoto. MJ led the Bulls back to a 5-point deficit at the 7:54 mark of the last quarter when MJ had to check out of the game due to his minutes restriction after the Bulls trailed by 15 late in the third term.
Jeez, I can see where this is going.
About 30 seconds before his departure, Jordan told Coach Albeck that he wanted to play the rest of the game, to which Stanley replied, "You can't."
Wow.
By the time MJ returned with 4:11 to go, New Jersey had extended the lead back to 9. The momentum that the Bulls had gathered in cutting back the Nets' lead died when Jordan was forced to check out. Albeck stated that if they had have broken the rules put in place by Bulls management surrounding Jordan's minutes, that they would have won 3 extra games since Jordan's return. This was their 7th straight road loss and 15 of their last 16 on the road, which doesn't exactly scream playoff team, does it?
It doesn't at all. It really, they were like an athlete tripping over hurdle after hurdle, trying to get through to the end of a race.
The race for the 8th playoff spot in this season, it was pretty ugly, wasn't it?
It was. Teams were trying to find ways to actually miss the playoffs, it seemed. Boston brought up its 60th win of the season, which was also the 3rd straight time they'd done so, by routing the Washington Bullets 116-97. Bill Walton had his first start of the season, capitalising with 13 of the team's first 28 points. He had a season-high 20 points and also brought down 12 rebounds. Bird top scored for the 60-13 Celtics with 27. Jeff Malone led the Bullets with 18 points. In Denver's 128-120 home win over Utah, 3 players tallied 35 points. Adrian Dantley was the Jazz's high man, whilst the Nuggets' Alex English and Calvin Nat also had 35 apiece. Not to be outdone, Wayne Cooper was super with 23 points and 17 rebounds for Denver. Not often you'd think that the leading scorers of a game, 3 players, would actually all tally 35 points. That's a pretty rare feat. In Philadelphia's 116-94 loss to Milwaukee, the 76ers' Moses Malone suffered a fractured right eye socket. He missed the remainder of the season and copped an inadvertent elbow or fist, it was described in the paper, to the face. The two teams would meet in the playoffs, and his absence would likely be the difference. And we'll get to that in our next episode of NB86. On the 29th, the visiting Cavaliers were led by World B. Free's 43 points, 15 of which came in the fourth quarter, in a 123-105 win over Atlanta. It was a big win for Cleveland, who was still battling with the Bulls for that last spot in the playoffs. Same day, Chicago at New York in front of 12,720 fans saw the Bulls have a 114-101 victory. They improved to 26-49. For Chicago, Jordan had 24 points, maximum security Banks 18 and 11 boards, and Charles Oakley 14 points and 11 rebounds. For New York, Ken Bannister had another great game, 24 points and 5 rebounds. Trent Tucker, 21 points, and Darryl Walker, how's this, 15 points, 13 assists and 7 steals. So, as I like to say, that's far from a pedestrian effort there from Walker.
With 10 minutes and 40 seconds remaining in this Knicks-Bulls game, the MSG PA announcer gave out a final score to an NBA game. Cleveland 123, Atlanta 105. This win gave Cleveland a 3.5 game lead over Chicago for the final playoff spot. Bulls coach Stan Albeck said the announcement made us play a little harder. The Chicago Bulls turned a 6-point deficit into a 1-point lead before Jordan checked out to save playing time for the last 2 minutes of the game. Jordan scored 14 fourth-quarter points and hit 2 big baskets in the final minute to seal the very valuable win for Chicago. With Paxson sitting out with a sore hip and Kyle Macy slowed with a sore knee, friend of the show Michael Bolton Holton filled in admirably. Jordan was due to have a follow-up CAT scan to assess any further healing his foot had done since his return.
That's great stuff. The Bulls really did well to fight their way back into playoff contention because 3.5 games behind the Cavs at this stage, and we're approaching the final 2 weeks of the season, they were really ST-ruggling. Now, Boston won its 11th straight game, escaping with a 122-117 win at home versus the New Jersey Nets. The 61-13 Celtics needed all 40 of Larry Bird's points. After back-to-back 3-point bombs from Darwin the Chef Cook, the Nets pulled within 3 points with 6 seconds left. Otis Birdsong led the Nets with 26 points. Cook played it up, a 17-point, 6-rebound, 10-assist, and 4-steal performance. That's a 3-hat effort. Mike Jaminski contributed 24 points and 13 rebounds.
It's since been found out that when it comes to shooting the basketball, Darwin Cook's personal motto is, if you never take them, you'll never make them.
It's funny you say that because earlier today, when one of the podcasts I was listening to ended, my podcast player just defaulted to an older episode of our series. And your pre-music comment, that was the basis of the episode where we first learnt about Darwin Cook. I actually giggled to myself for about 10 seconds after I heard it. So our sense of humour is questionable.
Yep.
But still.
Completely brilliant.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly right. Barkley lifted his 76ers to a 114-113 victory with 32 points and 25 rebounds against the visiting Dallas Mavericks. And Magic Johnson dished out 19 assists in LA as the Lakers held off the Warriors 124-117. On March 31, there were no games. Let's move straight through to April 1st. No fooling on this date. Chicago at Milwaukee in front of 11,052 at the Mecca saw the Bucks have a 116-107 victory. Chicago dropped to 26-50, 50 losses. Wow. Chicago were led by Jordan, 28 points and 5 rebounds. Woolridge had 22 points and 10 boards, and Charles Oakley, 17 points and 12 boards. Milwaukee were led by Terry Cummings, 32 points. Paul Pressey had 18 points, 6 boards, 7 assists, and Ricky Pierce had 18 points, and Randy Brewer, 9 points and 10 rebounds. Now, with the victory, Milwaukee won its 6th straight Central Division title. So that's a great effort there from the Bucks. A team that's often overlooked in the 1980s as one of the powerhouses, just couldn't get past the conference semis a majority of the time and got to the conference finals once and were ousted by the Celtics. But I won't actually spoil it and say what season that was.
that stat of 6 straight Central Division titles. That shows how good they were.
They were a great team.
Post-game, an unhappy Michael Jordan stormed out of the locker room after Chicago blew a chance to gain a full game on the Cavs for the last playoff spot. Jordan asked Krause when he would be able to play a full game. Jerry's response of, and I quote, "probably next season," had Mike or Mick seething.
We've never referred to him as Mick on this podcast series, but that's a great shout out to our very good friend Todd Spear, who dubbed him Mick out of nowhere. Hello to Todd if you're listening.
It was Jordan's limited playing time that probably led to them blowing an 8-point lead in the fourth. And when asked if he was tired of the minutes restriction he was under, MJ replied, "Yes."
I'm glad he elaborated.
With 4 minutes to go, the Bucks came out of a timeout down 8 and reeled off a 22-5 run to finish off the game.
That's soul-destroying, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, rough, especially considering the circumstances. The Bulls turned the ball over 20 times to the Bucks 9, and the win, as you mentioned before, sealed the Central Division for the Bucks. Bucks coach Don Nelson labeled MJ's, and I quote, "superhuman effort" of 28 points in 26 minutes, the second best individual effort against the Bucks this season. Annoyingly, there was no mention of the first place effort.
I was about to say, who was the best effort? There you go. Tree Rollins became the third player in NBA history to register 2,000 blocked shots in his Hawks 107-91 victory over the visiting Bullets of Washington. So that's a fair effort there from Tree. Boston went to Cleveland and demolished the Cavaliers 123-105. Dennis Johnson led the Celtics with 21 points. 28 and 47 Cleveland were led by World B. Freeze 24 points, and Boston improved to 62 and 13 on the season. At home, Adrian Dantley's 42 points couldn't steer Utah to victory, losing out to the LA Clippers 113-109. The Clips were led by Norm Nixon's 30 points and 11 assists. Big Ben, Benoit Benjamin, had a great game, notching 18 points and 16 rebounds. And for Utah, the mailman Karl Malone delivered 16 points and 14 rebounds, whilst his running mate John Stockton added 12 assists.
On the night the Bulls played the Milwaukee Bucks, 2 off-court issues for the Bulls were reported in the Tribune. Guard Quinton Daly requested that the Bulls excuse him for the rest of the season to remain in drug rehabilitation. The second was Orlando Woolridge's agent Larry Fleischer suspended contract talks with the Bulls, suggesting the high-scoring forward would test free agency at season's end. Quinton relayed the message to the Bulls via Gary Bettman, the NBA's head man of their drug rehab program. Some observers believe that Chicago brought Q back too quickly from his first 31-day stint in rehab that began on October 31st, as the Bulls were searching for offense in MJ's absence. Likely, on Jordan's return, the Bulls had no need to get Q back in any hurry.
Not only have you started to adopt the Nike comment instead of conversely, you've just completely stolen it and run with it.
Yep.
Well played.
In Woolridge's contract talks, apparently the Bulls offered Team Woolridge 3 years at $1.7 million, which was far short of the $800,000 per year number that O was after. As a restricted free agent, the Bulls had right of first refusal should any team offer Woolridge an offer sheet once he hits free agency.
On the 2nd of April, there were 5 games. Nothing overly interesting about those particular games. Kiki Vandeweghe was the pick of the scorers with 36 points in the Blazers' 121-109 victory at Seattle.
On the following day, April 3rd, an article appeared in the Tribune stating that MJ believed he was being jerked around big time by Bulls owner Jerry Reinsdorf with the minutes restriction he was under on his return. Jordan said that he had been medically cleared to play and that if Jerry Krause said anything other than this to the press, he was lying. He reiterated that the front office wanted to limit his minutes to be in the upcoming lottery. Jordan and Reinsdorf were due to meet the following day, and the owner understood Jordan's frustration as a competitor, but would be upset if he continued it after they had spoken. Krause said he's looking out for Jordan's future, and he doesn't want any animosity developing between him and Jordan.
Well,
Needless to say, Jerry, the horse had bolted.
the ship had sailed is what I was thinking as well. So insert any cliche you want there. On the 3rd, Chicago at Indiana in front of 11,599 saw the Bulls have a 1-point win, a very important win, 109-108. They improved to 27-50. It was the Pacers' 7th straight loss. For the Bulls, Jordan had 26 points, 5 rebounds, 3 assists, and 3 steals with 2 blocks. Gene Banks had 20 points and 10 rebounds, and Dave Corzine, the great man, had 12 points and 6 boards. For Indiana, Wayman Tisdale, 30 points and 8 rebounds, rest in peace. Herb Williams had 24 points, 9 boards and 5 blocks. And Vern Fleming, 16 points and 6 assists. And Clint Richardson, 6 points and 10 assists. Now, I've got here, this game was as close to a must-win as possible given the playoff machinations.
The circus of Jordan's playing time reached its ridiculous peak in the Bulls' win against the Indiana Pacers. John Paxson's push shot with 7 seconds remaining was overshadowed by Jordan's masterful performance, ending when he was benched with 31 seconds left and the Bulls trailing by 1 point, down the stretch of a season in which they desperately needed a win to make the playoffs.
That's farcical.
Yeah, it really became a complete mess. Under strict instructions from ownership to play no more than 14 minutes per half, Allbeck was met with a call of, "Allbeck, you're a nitwit," as he pulled Jordan from the game. Even Pacers coach George Irvine said he was shocked at the move and even thought that Jordan's replacement, Kyle Macy, was being sent into the game to play small forward.
Oh my goodness. What a calamity that is. That's nothing short of a farce. Boston's Big Three lived up to their nickname, establishing an NBA record 28th consecutive home win, 122-106, over Detroit. Vinnie Johnson led Detroit with 20 points. The Celtics improved to 63-13. Parrish, Bird and McHale totaled 83 points between them, and the record eclipsed the Minneapolis Lakers' mark of 27 straight home wins way back in the 1949-50 season. James Donaldson had 21 rebounds as his Mavericks held on for a 115-114 win versus the travelling Nuggets of Denver. The Nuggets' main man was Alex English with 28 points. Rolando Blackman, episode 70 of the show, had 25 points for Dallas.
In the Tribune on April 4th, most people alert enough to realise which side of the waffle iron gets the butter could do a better job of running the Bulls than Jerry Krause, wrote Bernie Lincecum. Bernie went on to speak of the Bulls' poor season, culminating in its star player sounding off on his team's want to win and make the playoffs, and also the Bulls pandering to MJ's return by hiring enough doctors to cure poverty.
Another bit of gold from the Tribune. Boston cruised to a 119-98 home win versus the New York Knicks. It chalked up the longest win streak in the NBA this season at 14 and set a new NBA mark with a 38th home win, passing previous single-season records that were held by the Lakers and 76ers franchises. Boston moved to 64-13. Atlanta dropped the game 135-129 in overtime at Washington, but Dominic Wilkins was sensational with 46 points, the third highest scoring game of his season. The best was still yet to come. The Bullets' Cliff Robinson had 31 points and 12 rebounds. Dan Roundfield was on fire with 29 points and 16 rebounds. And Jeff Malone and Gus Williams scored 27 points and 24 points respectively. Chris Mullins' rookie campaign was officially over after succumbing to a heel injury that he suffered back on March the 1st.
The aforementioned meeting between Jordan and the Jerrys discussed MJ's comments to the press, though Jerry Reinsdorf wasn't willing to talk about the talk, said Bob Sakamoto.
Wow.
MJ's playing time was to increase to 15 minutes per half in their upcoming game against the Hawks, though Reinsdorf again showed his reservation in saying the healing in Jordan's foot had slowed since Jordan returned to the court. This article actually pointed out that Jordan's outburst to the media was apparently due to a miscommunication. He believed that Dr. Hefferon had given him the green light to play as much as he wanted, leading to Jordan's criticism of the Jerrys. It was reported the following day that the meeting did nothing to restore Jordan's respect for Reinsdorf and Krause.
Wow. Things were pretty much at an all-time low as far as their early years relationship would go at this time.
Off to a bad start, and it didn't improve from there.
A previous comment you said was a meeting between Jordan and the Jerrys. For just a split second, I actually thought of them as a three-piece band. Not too sure why. Jordan was the front man on guitar. Anyhow, moving on.
You will notice that I have gotten sick of saying Reinsdorf and Krause, and I will just refer to them as the Jerrys.
Understandable.
In Jordan's previous 4 games, he was averaging 25 points on 58% shooting and scoring at a point a minute. Kyle Macy admired Jordan's passion for the game and his intensity in wanting to get back on the court. A win over Atlanta in the upcoming game could move the Bulls to within a half game of Cleveland for the last spot in the East.
Would they get there? Let's find out. Atlanta at Chicago. Sound like a bit of play school there. Atlanta at Chicago in front of 17,769. So pretty good, nearly full house crowd there.
Strong crowd.
Hello to Bob Saget, if you're listening. The Bulls were 102-97 victors and improved to 28-50 on the year. For Chicago, Jordan had 30 points, 3 rebounds, 3 assists. Dave Corzine, 20 points and 9 rebounds. And Charles Oakley, 6 points and 15 rebounds. For the Hawks, Dominique had 28 points, Doc Rivers 19 points, 7 assists, Spud Webb 17 points, 6 rebounds and 5 assists, and good news for Cliff Levingston fans, 12 points and 10 rebounds.
In this game, MJ exceeded his allotted 30 minutes of playing time by 1 minute in front of a sellout crowd at 1800 West Madison. The Bulls shot just 42% from the floor and started the game 5 for 20 with Jordan throwing up bricks himself in the first half, said Bob Sakamoto. Jordan pointed to the pre-game press conference to bury the hatchet with the Jerrys, affecting his concentration in the first half. Atlanta led the game by as much as 15 in the third term, as Jordan played 16 minutes and 21 seconds in the second half, something that owner Jerry Reinsdorf declined to comment on after coming down hard on Orbeck when he gave Jordan an extra minute of game time in his third game of his return.
The Bulls made a rod for their own back basically by having these minutes restrictions and making them so public. Now, on the 6th of April in Philly, Julius Erving's heroics were just what the doctor had ordered as the 76ers stole a stirring victory 95-94 over Boston after Larry Bird, the NBA's best free throw shooter, inexplicably missed both shots from the charity stripe with just 7 seconds left. On the ensuing play, a jump ball was called with only 3 seconds left. The rest is history.
Out the doctor, he's got a crack at it. 3-pointer, he got it! The Boston Celtics 14-game winning streak has come to an end on a dramatic shot by the doctor.
A gorgeous set play there. They tipped it to Julius. He locked his man and made a 3-pointer. What a terrific basketball game.
It was pandemonium at the Spectrum. The Celtics dropped to 64-14 and Philadelphia improved to 52-27. In the LA Lakers 109-103 loss at Houston, Magic Johnson notched 20 points and 20 assists. He had 14 such 2020 games in his career, courtesy of basketballreference.com. Thanks for those great stats. However, the assists were only tracked from the 83-84 season onwards, so you'd say there's probably a fair chance he would have got a few more of those in his earlier years of his career. Houston's Akeem Olajuwon had 25 points and 11 boards as they won their 50th game of the season, simultaneously denying the Lakers their 60th victory.
Just a week ago, Jerry Reinsdorf thought the Bulls' playoff chances were as slim as Minute Bowl's upper body, wrote Bob Sakamoto. Now they're taking on William Perry proportions as the Bulls had won 3 or 4 to find some form at just the right time.
That's not the first time the fridge has got a mention.
The Bulls needed to win 2 of their final 3 games to overtake the Cavs for the 8th and final playoff spot. People had made fun of Bulls trainer Mark Feil when he had made flight and hotel plans for Boston once the regular season had finished for the Bulls. Those people weren't laughing anymore.
Mark Feil was always well organised, wasn't he? Milwaukee at Chicago. Now we're talking about April the 7th here. In front of 10,249 fans, the Bulls had a great victory, 107-101, improving to 29-50, and the Bucks were 55-24. For Chicago, Michael Jordan, 26 points, 5 rebounds and 7 assists. Orlando Woolridge, 24 points and 8 rebounds. And Charles Oakley, 15 points and 15 boards. And for Milwaukee, Jerry Reynolds, 17 points, 7 rebounds, 10 assists, 4 steals and 3 blocks. That's one of the best stat lines you'll see in some time. Ricky Pierce had 14 points and Kenny Fields, 11 points and 12 rebounds. Now, this was Jerry Reynolds' rookie season. Most listeners will probably remember Jerry as a talented member of that expansion Orlando Magic from 1990 through 1992. He spent 3 seasons with Orlando and averaged almost 13 points a game.
As Cleveland was losing to Detroit 128-104, the Bulls moved a full game in front of them for the final playoff spot. George the Iceman Gervin stepped aside for MJ, who made his first start since breaking his foot, and Jordan responded with 10 first-quarter points as the Bulls jumped the Bucks 24-10 to start the game. Now, you mentioned Jerry Reynolds, who capitalized on the absence of all-star Squid Moncrief, and also Terry Cummings sat the entire fourth quarter after tweaking a hamstring.
I love how you've got Squid Moncrief. That's actually works beautifully when you say it that way. Very clever. The Knicks' Lewis Orr sunk an 18-footer with 3 seconds left, lifting New York to a 106-104 win at Madison Square Garden versus Indiana. It ended the Knicks' 8-game losing streak in the process. Gerald Wilkins of New York led all scorers with 29 points, and Ken Bannister had 13 points and 16 rebounds. Herb Williams had another great game with 23 points for the Pacers. On the 8th of April, Chicago at Atlanta in front of only 8,806 fans saw Atlanta have a 131-118 victory. Chicago dropped to 29-51. For the Bulls, Jordan had 30 points, 6 boards and 6 assists. Orlando had 18 points. Oakley, Gervin and Banks had 16, 15 and 10 points respectively. For Atlanta, Dominique, great game, 37 points and 13 boards. Randy Whitman, 23 points, and Spud Webb, another good game, 19 points and 7 assists.
Mark Feil, put those reservations for Boston on hold just for now. Cleveland's final 3 games were to come against Boston, Milwaukee and Chicago, with the Bulls to face Washington at home before the right to be beaten by Boston is held at Richfield Coliseum on the final day of the regular season. Chicago was never really in the second of a back-to-back against a Hawks team who hadn't played since being beaten by the Bulls 3 days earlier. Anthony Jerome Webb took advantage of the tired Bulls with repeated drives into the paint, and his dunk with 8.9 seconds remaining had the Omni rocking, all 8,800 of them. The Chicago Bulls mounted a spirited comeback with Jordan on the bench in the fourth, but as Bob Sakamoto said, this tired Bulls team trying to chase down the high-flying Hawks was like a Volkswagen trying to chase down a Porsche.
Nice work. Boston returned to the winner's circle with a confident 126-114 win at Milwaukee. So that was a good test for them before the playoffs came around. The 65-14 Celtics were led by Larry Bird's 26 points and 14 rebounds. And for the 55-25 Bucks, Terry Cummings had 22 points and 9 rebounds. On the 9th of April at New Jersey, the Celtics received a rude awakening, returning to the losing column, 108-98. The Nets' Mike Jaminski had the best game of his season, scoring highs in both points with 41 and rebounds 22. Kevin McHale led the 65-15 Celts with 18 points. So Mike Jaminski, another one of those underrated players throughout the 1980s, and was a big-time player at Duke as well. At home, Adrian Dantley exploded for 45 points in a losing effort, 113-108, against the Eddie Johnson-led Sacramento Kings. Eddie Johnson, former podcast guest, episode 41, another friend of the show. On the 10th, the Human highlight film had what would be his equal highest scoring game of his career, recording 57 points in Atlanta's 126-117 win over the visiting New Jersey Nets. He'd repeat the total the following season versus Chicago, #NB87. Neek matched St. Louis's Bob Pettit and Atlanta's Lou Hudson with their club mark of 57. So big-time scores going all around there. For the Nets, Mike Jaminski continued his great play with 35 points and 15 rebounds. Otis Birdsong had 22 points and Buck Williams had 13 points and 18 rebounds. Milwaukee did Chicago a huge favour, defeating Cleveland 102-101, dropping the Cavs one game behind the Bulls. The Bulls and Cavs each had one more game to play before they meet each other in the regular season finale.
On the following day, April 11, the headline Jordan causing tangle in testy tune-up.
Wow. Oh, goodness.
Michael Jordan was in the middle of 2 confrontations during practice, including a shouting match with Orlando and a tussle with Dave Corzine.
Hang on, I don't know how to feel about this.
Dave wins. It's all good, man. Relax.
I love Dave.
Dave wins.
What's MJ doing?
Dave wins. Relax.
Oh, sweet.
Corzine got tangled with Jordan after getting an offensive rebound, and initially it was believed that he was play fighting with Michael before Jordan took exception leading to Corzine needing to be bear hugged by Charles Oakley as Jordan backpedaled from the situation. Jordan named Corzine as the only guy on the team that he wouldn't mess with, and even pointed to his own sneakers in saying that if they got into it, he'd hit Dave once and run.
What? That was in the article.
In the trip.
That is fantastic. Dave Corzine, hey? Man Mountain.
Yeah. Earlier, Woolridge had sat out a drill during practice, drawing an earful from Jordan as he sat on the sidelines.
Can you imagine to see some footage of the Bulls practices and seeing what Jordan was like? He sounds like he was maniacal from day one. Just incredible stuff.
Maniacal, unless it came to Dave Corzine, apparently.
Well, that's right. With Dave Corzine as the only asterisk to that maniacal behaviour.
Hardly surprising, though.
No, exactly.
The emotion was due to continue as former coach Kevin Lockery comes into town as head coach of the Washington Bullets. Lockery told his assistant coaches when Jerry Krause was hired in March of 1985 by the Bulls to start looking for a job, stating that he knew Krause well and that he wouldn't want anyone working for him who knew him. In response, Crumbs said he was not one bit concerned about what Lockery thinks of him.
Oh, man, that's great stuff. This is awesome when this sort of stuff happens.
Yep.
It's great to relive it all these decades down the line. Cleveland had the unenviable task of travelling to Boston Garden. The 66-15 Celtics prevailed 117-104 behind Kevin McHale's 30 points. In limited minutes, no other Celtics scored more than Dennis Johnson's 16. For the 28-53 Cavs, World B. Free had 28 points. It meant that the Bulls and Cavs game to round out the regular season would effectively be a dead rubber. Washington at Chicago in front of 18,869, so a bumper crowd, saw the Bulls hang on for a 105-103 win. They improved to 30-51 on the season. For Chicago, Jordan had 31 points on a lowly 12 of 36 from the field, so he was jacking up shots with reckless abandon in 37 minutes. Paxson had 23 points and 9 assists, which is a great effort there from Johnny Pax. Charles Oakley, 13 points and 20 rebounds, and Dave the Man Mountain Corzine, 10 points and 9 boards. For Washington, Jeff Malone had 24 points and 6 rebounds. Cliff Robinson, who had some great games during the season as well for the Bullets, 23 points, 13 rebounds and 7 assists. And Gus Williams, 20 points and 5 assists.
Bring on Boston.
Nice.
The Bulls got an assist from the Celtics as Boston spanked Cleveland 117-104 at Boston Garden. The Bulls' win and the Cavs' loss sealed the 30-51 Bulls playoff berth, and Chicago celebrated with champagne and euphoria, wrote Bob Sakamoto. Playoff tickets go on sale at 10 a.m. on Saturday at the Chicago Stadium box office and at Ticketron.com.
I don't think that website would have had too many visits in 1986.
I was wondering how long it was going to take you to pick up on the 1986 website.
I was thinking, hang on, is that right? I love it.
Caught up in the hysteria of a season-high crowd for the Bulls, Jerry Reinsdorf waived Michael Jordan's time restrictions at halftime of the game. After consulting with partner Lester Crown, drawing the high praise of, he's a kind man and he has a heart from the Bull star.
Jeez, that's classic stuff.
Halftime.
That's a unique scenario there. Just said at halftime, well, stuff it, let's do it.
John Paxson had one of his finest performances of the year with 23 and 9 assists and 1 shot to the face from Manu Bol.
Oh.
MJ pointed to the presence of Manu Bol in his 12 for 36 shooting night and praised the play of Paxson and Banks in supporting his 31 points. The Bulls erased a 14-point deficit in the last 6 minutes of the third term with a 17-7 run.
On the 12th, second last day of the regular season, at home, Dominique Wilkins secured the NBA scoring title and his team's 50th win on the season. With 34 points and the Hawks steamrolled Indiana 108-91. Wilkins raised his average to 30.33 points per game. Next closest were Adrian Dantley at 29.83 of Utah and Alex English of Denver with 29.8. However, neither of those two gents played. They were being held out in preparation for the upcoming playoff runs. Rookie Xavier McDaniel matched his season high with 36 points and nabbed 17 rebounds as his Seattle Supersonics enjoyed a 121-101 win versus the visiting Golden State Warriors. Tom Chambers was on song with 27 points and 16 rebounds. For the Warriors, Terry Teagle was the main man with 29 points. Eric Sleepy Floyd had 9 points and 15 assists, and Mr. Mean, aka Larry Smith, had 20 rebounds.
Winning a playoff spot was like a soothing balm on a Chicago Bulls season full of open wounds, wrote Bob Sakamoto.
That's perfection there.
You feel better about the whole season because you don't have to go on holidays after the season finishes, says John Macbeth Paxson. An unnamed radio broadcaster said that the Bulls locker room was 5 times more crazy than that of the Bears after they won the Super Bowl back in January. These guys were acting like they really cared. The Bulls played 500 basketball over the last 26 games up to this point to help secure their playoff spot.
It took them a while, but they got there just in the nick of time. A fascinating run, albeit a quite strange and sometimes lacking of enthusiasm. Therefore, Chicago at Cleveland on the 13th of April, the final day of the regular season, in front of 8,056 fans. So, terrible crowd. Obviously, they knew the Bulls were going to be in the playoffs, so barely attended. Cleveland won the game 104-97. So Chicago dropped to 30-52. The Cavs finished their season 29-53. Jordan had 29 points, 4 assists and 4 steals, and Oakley, Woolridge, Banks and Macy all had 10-plus points apiece. For Cleveland, World B. Free had 31 points, Dirk Minifield 20, Keith Lee 14 points and 13 rebounds, and Roy Hinson 11 points and 9 rebounds. It should be noted that Keith Lee's 13-rebound haul was the 5th best effort of his career. He grabbed his would-be career high of 17 boards a week prior at Washington. He had a great career at Memphis, was drafted by the Bulls, who then traded him to Cleveland in the deal that brought Oakley to Chicago, which we outlined at the beginning of the NB86 series.
Stanley Albeck used the more relaxed situation of a clinched playoff position to tinker Hatfield and fine-tune his team for the upcoming series versus Boston. Some players were actually a little upset with the casual, laid-back nature of the game. The two teams traded baskets all game before 2 minutes of real basketball at the end. Even World B. Free said that both teams were horsing around before they decided to take it to the Bulls in the last 2 minutes. 2 days prior, the Bulls sent their playoff roster to the league office, with Joanne Oldham replacing Michael Holton, who then boltoned for the Philippines.
I like that.
Though doctors believe that Oldham would not actually be ready to play until Game 4 if the series was to go that far. The Bulls' 30-52 record was Albeck's first ever losing season as a coach since he first entered coaching in the NBA in the 1979-80 season.
Nice reference there to Michael Holton and his short trip to the Philippines where he starred over there. In other games on the final day of the regular season, New Jersey visited Boston and was sent packing 135-107. The Celtics unleashed a 46-point third quarter, rolling to a 67-15 record on the year. This gave them an NBA record 40-1 mark at home, a record that still stands to this day in 2016. The Bulls went 39-2 in 1996. San Antonio's Mike Mitchell had 40 points in the Spurs' 123-118 win versus the visitors from Portland. It was Mitchell's second 40-point game of the season. Blazers were led by Kiki Vandeweghe's 28 points. Here's a quick little tidbit, mate. In an article titled Bird Wins Title, Boston's Larry Bird overtook Golden State rookie Chris Mullin for the NBA foul shooting title on the final day of the regular season Sunday. But Bird's biggest threat came from Celtic teammate Danny Ainge. Ainge, who had averaged just 1.6 free throws per game this season, needed to sink 13 in Sunday's 135-107 rout of New Jersey to qualify for the crown with 125 free throws made. He tried his best, but fell just 2 short as he made 11 of 12. Danny was deliberately trying to get fouled, Robert Parrish said with a smile.
That's awesome. That is absolutely fantastic.
And he didn't get fouled enough and ended the season with 123 successful foul shots in 136 attempts for a 90.4 percentage. So pretty cool. Moving on, mate, let's close out this episode with some players of the week. For March 30, Charles Barkley of Philadelphia had 27.5 points, 20.5 rebounds, 4.5 assists, 2.5 steals and 1 block as the Sixers went 2-2. Player of the month for March, Larry Bird of Boston with 30.9 points, 9.1 rebounds and 6.5 assists as the Celtics went 15-2. April 6, Herb Williams was player of the week for Indiana with 25.7 points, 13.3 rebounds and 3.7 blocks, and the Pacers dropped all 3 games. April 13, the human highlight film, Dominique Wilkins of Atlanta, 42.7 points, 8.7 rebounds and 1.7 assists as Atlanta went 3-0. Our high men for this period of time, Dominique, not surprisingly, had 57 points versus New Jersey on the 10th of April, 25 rebounds to Charles Barkley for Philadelphia versus Dallas on the 30th of March, and Magic Johnson had 20 assists for the Lakers at Houston on the 6th of April. It was his third 20-assist game of the season. And the NBA standings through the end of the regular season, our division leaders were as follows. Atlantic Division was Boston's with 67-15. Milwaukee won the Central at 57-25. Houston were Midwest champs with a 51-31 mark. And in the Pacific, the Lakers were 62-20. So they were on fire. The Bulls went 30-52 on the year. They went 6-4 in this final block. And the Knicks were the league cellar dwellers at 23-59. The playoffs would commence on April the 17th, and the first round matchups were as follows. Do you want to go through the East and West, mate?
Yes, in the East, you'd have the Boston Celtics and Chicago Bulls, Milwaukee playing the New Jersey Nets, the Philadelphia 76ers versus the Washington Bullets, and the Atlanta Hawks versus the Detroit Pistons. In the Western Conference, the Lakers would open up against the San Antonio Spurs, Houston versus the Sacramento Kings, Denver would go up against the Portland Trailblazers, and the Dallas Mavericks versus the Utah Jazz.
Awesome stuff, mate. That rounds us out for the end of the 86 regular season. Thanks again for being a part of the show, mate. Is there anything you'd like to add before we do end this episode?
Giddy up!
Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the show and share my web address with your friends and colleagues, inallairness.com. Check out the podcast archive for plenty more episodes with high-profile guests. Follow me on Twitter at inallairness. Please add your like to the show's social hub, facebook.com/inallairness. Join me next time for another edition of the show. That Wilkins ate some dodgy oysters in Dallas the day before. For Cleveland, it was turpentine. Mal dropped 26 points. While Sneak dropped 6 kilos, apparently after he had a bad dose of the...
A bad dose.
That's one of the best Freudian slips.
Well, Nick, you dropped a deuce.
I feel bad for embarrassing Wilkins by saying that. I should be embarrassed myself. That was a terrible Freudian slip.